Horror is most effective when it feels personal. It thrives in the chasms of our psyche, those dark places where we can't escape. What made Dead Space so terrifying wasn't just its necromorphs or the haunting isolation of the Ishimura. It was the silence of space, the silence of Isaac Clarke. Isaac wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a hero. He was a systems engineer, dragged into chaos by circumstance, and unlike so many protagonists of the late 2000s, he wasn't snarky or self-assured. He didn't crack jokes to diffuse tension. Isaac didn't say anything at all, and I think that silence was key. Isaac's voicelessness wasn't a limitation, it was a design choice, a deliberate choice, one that let Dead Space become something rare. A survival horror game where the protagonist didn't break the immersion. His terror was your terror. His survival was your responsibility. In the first game, Isaac Clarke wasn't a character in the traditional sense. He was a placeholder for the player. The lack of dialogue wasn't just about silence, it was about furthering the sense of isolation. Every corner, every sound, every shadow of the Ishimura felt like a threat because you couldn't rely on anyone, not even Isaac, to guide you through it. This choice made Dead Space terrifying in ways other games just couldn't match. Isaac's silence let the Ishimura speak for itself. Bloodied walls told stories, taught you how to survive. If you're familiar with Dead Space at all, then you already know. Strategic, deliberate, desperate dismemberment was the only way to escape the horrors of the necromorphs. The game trusted you to piece together the narrative. No exposition dumps, no monologues to explain why you should care. But silence doesn't last forever. By Dead Space 2, Isaac Clarke was no longer a blank slate. He had a voice, a personality.
I know what I have to do.
A past that haunted him. This was a bold choice that gave us a deeper look into Isaac as a character. He wasn't just a survivor anymore, he was a man haunted by the events that took place aboard the doomed Ishimura. His voice added depth to the story, but it also changed how the game felt, which is not a bad thing. In Dead Space 2, the horror was no longer merely external. Isaac's unraveling mind became a focal point. You weren't just fighting the necromorphs anymore, you were also fighting Isaac's demons. For many, this made the story richer, more personal. But something was lost in the transition. Isaac's voice pulled back the curtain. He was no longer just an extension of the player, he became his own person, with his own thoughts and feelings.
I need you to be rescued.
And while this gave us powerful moments, it also created a gap, a separation between player and protagonist that the first game just never had. So why does the first Dead Space still stand out even today? I think it comes down to restraint. Restraint in its storytelling, restraint in its design. The Ishimura was as much a character as Isaac, Kendra, or Zack. The game didn't need cutscenes to scare you. It used the environment, and the sound design was masterful. The gameplay mechanics forced you to stay calm under pressure, to think before you acted. Perhaps most importantly, Dead Space respected its players. It didn't rely on constant jump scares or hand-holding. It let you feel lost, vulnerable, and overwhelmed. And that's why it worked. The Dead Space remake reintroduces Isaac Clarke to a new generation of players. This time, he speaks, even in the Ishimura's silence.
Isaac, Hammond.
Daniels?
But the question remains, does this evolution build on the original's legacy, or does it dilute what made it so terrifying in the first place? Isaac's journey from silent engineer to fully realized protagonist is a reflection of the franchise itself. The first Dead Space thrived on what it didn't say, and that silence is why it still stands out as one of the greatest survival horror games ever made. My name is Voki. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to watch your back and your vents. See you in another video. Bye.